All right, friends, welcome back to the show where this week we offer up another fun roundtable discussion on a frequently requested topic. Now, as I bring a third child into the world, I have a few of my own thoughts and opinions on the world of kids and parenting for sure. But no matter how I learn, I still have questions. And so do you. In fact, raising children, feeding them, relating to them, keeping them happy and healthy is one of the most common topics in my DMs and one of the more popular interview themes for our feed. So in this episode, you'll hear from some of the biggest names and brightest minds in the space, from experienced parents to accomplished scholars, doctors, best-selling authors, and more. We cover the importance of nutrition and gut health, handling picky eating, building connection, the science behind tantrums and developing brains, communication and independence, just to name a few. And while this episode features some of our most impactful segments on the topic, the full conversations from which they're pulled offer tons of additional knowledge. Listen for episode numbers between each guest rotation or search the word kids on the show's website at bewellbykelly.com to find the source material and more. Okay, let's get right in. We begin with Dr. Nicole Berkins, child psychologist and bestselling author and nutritionist from episode number 134, who connected the dots between nutrition and behavior. Listen for a familiar structure in her diet tips and an appearance by Bash himself.
The reality is the vast majority of people in the world, parents who are having challenges with their kids, have no idea that what they're feeding their kids is probably a part of what's happening. And when a parent brings a child into their pediatrician's office or into, the preschool classroom or, wherever they might be interfacing with professionals, and they're bringing up concerns like, wow, my child cannot settle down to sleep and doesn't sleep for more than 2 hours at a time. Or my kid's so hyper, he can't even focus to stick with a play activity. Or my kid is so anxious that he is, not leaving the house to go do things with friends or family members. To me, knowing what I know now and what I understand about the research connection between food and nutrition and mental health, asking about a child's diet and eating habits and nutrition status is one of the first things we should be looking at. But unfortunately, most parents, by the time they get to my clinic, have seen numerous professionals and no one has raised that question or that issue with them. And that's so unfortunate because to me, nutrition and diet are some of the lowest hanging fruit when it comes to supporting a child's behavior, learning, attention, anxiety, all of those things. Let's just talk about some basics that are helpful. Things like stabilizing blood sugar throughout the day and what that looks like for a kid who's on what I call the blood sugar roller coaster all day long, which is the vast majority of American kids, at least, where they're eating a breakfast of simple carbohydrates and sugars in the form of, breakfast cereals with cow's milk on it, or pastries, or, Pop-Tarts, or some of the popular kids' yogurts, things like that, things that kids sort of like and that are popular in America for kids to eat for breakfast. And it spikes their blood sugar. And then they're hyper and inattentive and their mood might be great, but they are really dysregulated. And then they crash 60 to 90 minutes later and they're lethargic and they're grumpy and they're irritable. So we hand them goldfish crackers, or we hand them, a fruit leather, or we hand them a cheese, whatever it is. And then they're back up and then they crash again. And there's so many kids riding this blood sugar roller coaster all day long. Well, because blood sugar regulation has everything to do with how our brain is functioning. And when your kid is spiking and crashing with their blood sugar throughout the day, that is not having a positive impact on their mood, on their behavioral regulation. It is not supportive of keeping the ability to manage anxiety, learning, attention, all of these things. And what we have to remember is these kinds of things impact children even more than they impact adults. Kids are not just miniature adults. They are in a phase from birth to 18-ish. We could even make the argument into the early 20s of very rapid, very profound brain growth and body growth and development. And so things like blood sugar dysregulation impact a kid much more so even than they would an adult. And so it's important to understand that loss of sleep impacts a kid much more significantly than it does an adult. So when we think about that blood sugar regulation piece for kids, one of the simplest things that we can start to do to improve these kinds of challenges, behaviorally and learning wise for kids, is just to make sure they're eating consistently throughout the day, making sure that we're giving them protein with their meals, particularly in the morning. I kid you not, I will have parents who will call me 48 to 72 hours after an appointment where I say, let's just see what happens if we start giving a good source of protein in the morning before your kid heads off to school. And they will call me 2 to 3 days later and go, I can't believe this is my same child. The teacher actually sent me an email that said something positive for the first time all year. My kid wasn't a total grumpy, irritable mess when they, headed out the door. So protein, healthy fats, looking at kids need carbs. Please hear me on that. Don't take this to the extreme of, carbs and sugar are bad. Actually, kids need good sources of carbs all through the day to fuel the rapid development that they're in. So unless it's an extreme circumstance with, seizures or things like that, we want kids to be having good amounts of carbs throughout the day. But carbs in the form of whole grains, not muffins and donuts and things like that, right? And paired with healthy fats, paired with proteins. That's really key. And making sure that we're looking at on product labels, what does that added sugar line say on there? Because really the goal for kids is to stick to no more than 25 grams of added sugar in a day. And while that might sound like a lot, you start looking at that protein bar even that you might be giving your child, or that, yogurt or something like that. You see, oh my gosh, there's a popular kids yogurt that has as much sugar in it as a can of soda pop. That is almost their entire allotment for the day. Some of the juices and some of the sports drinks, when you look at that, it's like, wow, that is an entire allotment of added sugar for the day. And that doesn't take into account anything else that they're eating or drinking. So that's another big piece, is just starting to look at how much added sugar does my child have in the day, because the research is crystal clear on this. People can try to argue with me all day long about how sugar isn't bad for kids. Nothing is good or bad. It's all about how much they're getting and the context of it. But the research is crystal clear that excessive amounts of added sugars do really bad things to the human brain, particularly when we're talking about children. And people tend to think of this nutrition piece around a child's weight, or around those types of things with physical health. And yes, that's important. But in this context, we're talking about brain development. We're talking about behavior. We're talking about mental health. And sugar is a big piece of that. So looking at how to do, protein, healthy fat, carbs, reducing the amount of added sugar. And another really simple one is make sure your kid's getting enough water. The majority of kids, studies show, at least in the US, are walking around with at least a mild level of dehydration, if not moderate to significant. And again, some kids, we physically, it's so bad that we see it, dry lips, dry skin, kind of, just not looking well, but even mild levels of dehydration, which you won't notice physically in them. Those mild levels we see in the research, it has a negative impact on their learning. It has a negative impact on their attention, on their behavior, on their anxiety. So making sure that they're getting enough water, not sports drinks, not soda pop, not juices, but getting enough water throughout the day. These are some of the simple things that I see day in and day out in my practice make a significant difference. Let's just start with the basics. And for most kids, having a good handle on some of the basics when it comes to nutrition and food makes a really big difference.
I can't even tell you how happy I am to hear you to just get on that soapbox and go for it. Because for me personally, it's been a decade of preaching blood sugar balance to even my adult clients, teaching them all about starting their day with protein and getting a significant amount of protein, what that blood sugar roller coaster you're talking about is all about. And becoming a mom, it was so important to me that my clients knew how to do that throughout pregnancy and know how to do that with their kids. It is so critical. I see it in Sebastian as a 2.5-year-old. Like if there is a day where he doesn't start with either he's, having chicken sausage, or he's like having eggs, or he's, having a chia seed, a hemp heart smoothie situation with me, that type of a day is such a different Sebastian than the days where we went to brunch with grandma and he got something else. And you see it. I see it because he's such an even keeled kid and his mood is really stable. And so the days when there is more sugar, it's so obvious to me where it's coming from. You see it at that 90-minute mark. We're melting down about the sandwich being cut the wrong way on that day. On most days we're not. And so it's so critical for people to understand, and so much. And I love that you talked about the protein and the healthy fat piece, because I think people immediately think blood sugar balance is really difficult. And it's just like, let's not eat naked carbohydrates that are just spiking blood sugar. The pancake syrup and strawberries together is a triple spike up. That is a massive roller coaster and a hard crash. It's how can we slow that down? Like, how can we make that last in their bodies a little bit longer? So important. And I'm so glad that you touched on that. It's like all I'm talking about in my course and with the moms that I work with. So important.
It's so critical, and it doesn't have to be complicated. And I think that's the biggest thing. And I'm sure you see that in your work. It's the biggest thing that keeps parents from sort of being willing to go down that path to saying, what could be possible here in the realm of how I'm feeding my child and how their brain is functioning. Just that openness to it, I think, is an important starting point.
Dr. Nicole and I agree that keeping it simple is the way to go, and you don't even have to build your own system to get it done. Knowing how overwhelming it can be, I wrote a course on feeding children using the Fab Four. Within the comprehensive guide, you will learn how to introduce foods in the flavor window, which are the first 18 months of life, how to avoid picky eating, and overall how to get your kids to eat healthier. The link is in the show notes if you're interested in learning more. Moving on, I talked to Jennifer Anderson, a registered dietitian and founder of Kids Eat in Color. This is episode number 189, where our focus narrowed on the important communication cues, spoken and unspoken, involved with cooking for and feeding a little one. How do you conversate around, I'm not making another meal, or this is the last chance you're getting food until dinner, or things of that nature, where sure, they might just decide, I'm up from the table. I don't want what you're serving, but in 5 minutes, I'm going to want in the snack drawer.
Yeah. And the answer is no. Like, I am done for the day. But I'm living this day in and day out. Here's what I think is the most empowering thing you can say to your child that is empowering to you and to your child. And that is, you don't have to eat it. Really nicely, calmly. You don't have to get all worked up about it. It's just a fact. You don't have to eat it. And when you say you don't have to eat it to your 2-year-old who has somehow gotten out of the high chair, and they're standing there and they're waving their fork or something and they're yelling, I want macaroni and cheese or whatever it is that they think that they want in that moment, you could just say, you don't have to eat it. And there's not much of a power struggle that can happen after that, because they know they don't have to eat the kale that's on the table or the sweet potato or whatever it is. They don't have to eat it. But also, you're not saying, oh, and I'm going to get up and make you, whatever you asked for. And so there's this balance. When you say you don't have to eat it, you're just kind of saying, hey, the reality is you don't have to eat it. And you don't have to say, oh, and I'm not getting up and making you anything else. You can say that, but that you're like re-engaging that power struggle. But when you just say, hey, you don't have to eat it, and you continue to sit there and you continue to eat them, and then you engage them on another topic. What did you think about the fire truck? Or what color are the peas on the table? Or, whatever it is that they're interested in, then you're maintaining a connection with your child. And you're getting them off you're getting them off their game. You're just saying, hey, I'm not going to have that fight with you.
Yeah. So, let's fast forward, because they don't eat, they have the power and they decide not to eat. Totally on board with that. And I love that, because I do find that it's interesting when you give them the power, how often they come back around and decide to try something.
Oh yeah.
Way faster than when you say you have to do something. then they dig their heels in. But if they do decide not to eat it and you get up from the table and it's not a scheduled snack time or it's, time for bed, what conversations are you having around feeding them? And do you ever decide like, okay, yeah, you really haven't eaten and I'm going to feed you something before you go to sleep or before like I'm going to give you a snack?
Yeah. So as a parent, it is also your job to have no idea what you're doing at any given time and to try to use your judgment on the fly, right? So I think this can be one of those situations. What we don't want to see is parents swooping in and giving rescue snacks all the time. Oh, you didn't eat your breakfast, but I know you're still hungry, so here's a snack. Often what's happening is that how they're saying, I want XYZ, and they know they're going to get it if they don't eat their dinner and they're hungry, and they know that their parents don't want them hungry, right? And so you get into this situation. And I don't have any judgment for any parent who gets into that situation. I think we all know how they got into that situation and why, and how close any of us are to that situation. So there's certainly no judgment if you find yourself there. But if you're wanting your kid to branch out and you're wanting to kind of stop that and start getting them to eat more than the meal, you really have to stop the rescue snacks. While it's always okay to have an exception, you are the parent, you get to decide when your family needs an exception. And in fact, I actually made an exception 2 nights ago with my child who hadn't eaten well at dinner. We always have a bedtime snack because remember, I have the kid who fell off the growth chart, right? Yeah. So for us, there's always a bedtime snack. But he was kind of sick. And so he didn't eat the bedtime snack. And then, right before bed, he says, I'm hungry. We almost never give a true, like, you're in bed and now you're saying you're hungry. Almost never. But given all these extenuating circumstances, I said yes. And guess what happened the next night? Mommy, I'm so hungry. I need a snack in bed, right? Kids want to know, hey, can I do this every single night? And the answer is no. And that, the second night I was like, no, you're going to be fine. We're going to have a big breakfast in the morning. So there are these situations. It is perfectly okay, especially in the context of feeding your child 4, 5, 6 times a day, whatever your meal and snack schedule looks like. A lot of times parents get concerned that if they're saying no and their child is actually hungry, that they are somehow saying, I don't trust you to understand your hunger, or I want to end your suffering in any way, shape, or form at any time, and there's something wrong with the hunger sensation. It's actually okay for us to occasionally experience like a feeling of being hungry, especially in the context, like one time I had somebody say, you're advocating starving children. And I was like, actually, I'm like advocating feeding kids like every 3 hours. I mean, and usually kids do not wake up in the middle of the night. Has it happened every now and then? Yes. Is it going to happen routinely? No, especially if you're providing like a high fat dinner with plenty of protein and like that sort of thing. So we can kind of get pulled into kids kind of exploring what is possible and what is not. And we don't have to.
It is kind of interesting too, because even just thinking of, for me, like thinking about the breastfeeding journey and feeding in the middle of the night and knowing like you can perpetuate that behavior by continuing to feed at that 3 a.m. window, 2 a.m. window, because their body is going to produce ghrelin like a clock hormone that says like, you feed me at this time, I'm hungry at this time. And so from my standpoint, Sebastian going to even preschool and having even more timed lunch and snack and being able to replicate those schedules at home, you see that your kids are not asking for snacks when they have those timed snack times. It's not turning around and asking his preschool teacher for a snack in the middle of the day when it's not snack time. He's at story time, he's at circle time, he's on the playground, and just reminding myself, like, he doesn't need to be eating all day. Like, it's wrecking his oral microbiome. And it is also like just out of boredom maybe, or he needs to get outside. I'm just like, all right, everybody outside, because they never ask me for snacks outside. But if they're in view of the kitchen, it's like being an adult. You're like, there's my pantry. There's my fridge. What's inside?
Right. And even just keeping the food in the refrigerator or in the cupboards. we don't have to have food laying out everywhere. And I just like, especially as the primary person feeding children in our house, I don't want to always be thinking about food. It's nice to walk through the kitchen and not have to think, oh my gosh, there's the orange that I'm going to have to cut up, all these things. So it does, we do ourselves a favor when we can say, hey, the kitchen is closed.
Now, when it comes to like stress at meal times, what do you normally see as like the most stressful thing for parents when it comes to feeding their kids? And what are some strategies you have to lowering stress around meal times?
Yeah. So to me, one of the biggest stressors is a child not eating enough food or not eating several foods. That is the biggest thing. So we have a couple of occupational therapists, a psychologist, a pediatrician, and eating disorder specialists. And all of us, what we all find is that it's really this like standoff between the parents thinking they know exactly what the kid should be eating and the kid being like, no, like, I am in charge of myself, right? This causes so much stress. Just what is your job here? It's actually not to force feed your child, to like hold their nose and make them eat food. And when we give parents training around that, then all of a sudden parents are like, oh my gosh, my life has changed because now I have less stress. But if your kid is a picky eater, that doesn't mean you're not stressed out at mealtime. You may not have a picky eater and you're still like stressed out the nose because you're constantly having these power struggles. We just see it. We all see it. We just really have to step back and say, look, I don't know what's going on inside my kid's body. I just can't feel it. They're the only one who can feel it. And so I have to come to a place where I can find that balance.
We don't have to eat it. Wow. There's one magical phrase we can all use to diffuse battle mode at the dinner table. Our next guest, Dr. Eliza Song, is a holistic pediatrician who joined me for episode 208 to talk about immunity and gut health. Your expertise lies in immunity for kids, wellness for kids, and that all starts in the gut. You mentioned using fermented foods, fiber, phytochemicals, like I'm sure berries and polyphenols and all of that good stuff, animal proteins, things high in zinc and glutamine. So when you think about, or when you're working with a patient, how do you understand where their gut health is? Like what kind of testing do you normally do? And then what kind of recommendations do you make with the parents to really work on their child's gut health and thus their immunity?
I'm so glad you started off by saying how intimately connected the gut and the immune system are. As your baby's gut microbiome is developing, from the moment they're born, your gut is communicating with your immune system. In fact, 70% of our immune systems lie in our gut. And I'll have parents and kids think about, when you open your mouth, say, and you see their little tonsils in the back of their throat. Your gut has tonsil-like patches lining your entire intestinal tract. And these patches, they're called Peyer's patches or gut-associated lymphoid tissue. They are communicating with the inside of your intestine and directly with your blood's immune system. They're that interface. And what's fascinating is they're the first contact, right? These tonsil-like patches in your intestine, first contact with most of the outside world, right? If you think about it, we're one hollow tube. So it's not just what we eat, it's what we're swallowing, the microbes that are passing through us. And so our patches, these Peyer's patches, will sample what's going on in our intestines. And let's say we have a virus or bacteria that is trying to invade. Those, our guts and immune system will tell our blood immune system, hey, start reacting. This is foe. We don't like that, right? On the other hand, let's say you're eating some berries, let's say, and those come down and get well digested and they're, kind of interacting with our gut's immune system. And our gut says, oh, that's friends. We're going to let that in and we're not going to have an immune reaction. Mm-hmm. Now, what happens though if you start eating the same foods over and over and over again? And we're in a rush. So we're not chewing, we're not slowing down. Those food particles are not as well digested. So then you have maybe larger proteins like the gluten protein found in wheat and other grains, or let's say the casein protein from dairy. And let's think, right? Dairy and wheat are the two most common foods that most kids will eat all the time. And so then your intestines are bombarded with those foods. They are inflammatory by themselves. And your immune system says, wait a second, I was okay with this food. Now I'm not so okay with it. This is kind of looking like a foe, right? And in the worst case scenario, your immune system starts to attack, but confuses that gluten protein for a protein in your thyroid, right? Or an antigen in your joints. And all of a sudden, now the attack is on you and we develop autoimmunity. So that's why we want that variety in so that our immune system doesn't ever get sensitized to any particular food. And so when we talk about, how do we support our gut microbiome to support our immunity and talk to parents, I talk to parents and kids, right? It's got to be with the kids. I mean, even as toddlers, even if you're thinking, oh, they're not going to understand, they sure can understand, right? Because they're going to understand how we talk about it as well. So I don't ever like to say a food is bad for you or food's really good for you because we don't want to have that emotional setup with food. What I talk to kids about is, wow, there's some foods that are so strong for your body, so strong for your mind. And then I get to get a sense of what is important for that child, right? For a lot of teenagers, it's their skin. Guaranteed I can connect your gut microbiome to your skin health, right? Or your hair, right? For some kids, it's being a super fast athlete, running on the soccer field. Or for other kids, it's being able to play their violin with ease and being able to be on stage. And so all of those, because of the gut-brain, gut immune system connection, we can tie back to, you know what? If we ate foods that were really strong for your gut microbiome, those awesome bugs in your belly, you would be able to run faster, think more clearly, get along better with your friends, like all the things that are really important for them. So that way, then kids start to have more ownership of, wow, okay, I have more gut bugs in and on me than I have human me cells. So yes, I want me to be happy, but that means taking care of the other me that's in my gut. Right. So that way we take a little less battle out of it for parents. And it's not just about parents saying, oh my gosh, you ate that sugary blue thing? Like, what did you do? And I've been there, right? Yeah. I've definitely said that to my son, like, what did you just choose to eat? Right. So, yeah. but now let's step back. It's all about resilience. That one time isn't going to destroy your gut microbiome as long as we are mindful of making strong choices for our gut microbiome most of the time. Feeding our gut, all of the gut microbiome nourishing foods, fiber, legumes, whole grain, the colorful fruits and vegetables to get all the phytonutrients in that support our gut and our genes, right? And those fermented foods. And then we have to also think about not just what's nourishing your gut microbiome, but what are the insidious things that are harming our kids' gut microbiome. And it's really in our ultra-processed world, we see these studies just came out, that ultra-processed foods have been linked with a significantly increased risk of Alzheimer's and dementia later on in life. And what are these ultra-processed foods? I mean, your listeners are well aware. It's not just a matter of not eating out of a package, because I'm not going to lie, I throw in a bag of popcorn into my kids' bags, we'll throw in bars, but you have to be a very savvy label reader so that you are choosing foods that are minimally processed, still have whole food ingredients that are not ultra processed. Because in the ultra processing, what we see is all of these food additives, right? What I call these microbiome mischief makers. And food additives, one of the fastest growing industries in the world. Food emulsifiers, food dyes, all those added, FDA approved food additives directly cause gut dysbiosis and directly cause leaky gut. So we have to be aware of that. And I'm not saying, again, never eat out of a package, because your kids are going to at some point revolt against that, right? So teach them how to make healthier lateral swaps, these simple shifts.
Next up, from episode number 151, the famous Dr. Becky Kennedy, a clinical psychologist, mother of three, and founder of the breakthrough global parenting community, Good Inside. In this excerpt, we unpacked tantrums and other big emotions.
Let's put tantrums in context, then we could talk about transitions and family transitions and why that might result in more tantrums. I think that'll even become obvious when we really understand, again, first what tantrums are.
Okay.
If I think about the job of a kid in their early years, right, all their childhood, to me, it's like they're preparing to be adults, right? I think that's what we're trying to help our kids do. We're trying to have nice moments with them, of course, but we parent our kids and they're going to be adults for way longer than they're going to be living in our house, hopefully, right? So, and if we think about the emotional preparation an adult needs, and this might sound silly to say it, but no adult gets rid of emotions. Like kids are frustrated, adults are frustrated. Kids get sad, adults get sad. Kids feel jealous, adults feel jealous. Like I don't know anyone who came to my private practice and told me like, oh, my parents did such a good job. I never felt jealous. I never felt frustrated after the age of 18, right? No. You have all the feelings. And actually, I think it's really powerful to think about childhood as like practicing those feelings. Because by the time you're 18 or 30 or 50, either you've learned some solid coping mechanisms for those feelings, or you haven't. The feelings are going to be there either way. So either by the time you're 30, you have 30 years of learning how to cope with tough feelings that come your way in life, or you're still at the developmental age of, I don't know, of 2, right? And maybe adult tantrums don't look the exact same as kids, but sometimes they do. They actually look the exact same. Like we've all probably seen those things, right? So when we think about what we want to do for our kids, it's hard to say we want them to have those tough feelings. They're just inevitably going to happen. We want to prepare them to be able to cope. And you can't learn coping skills for a feeling unless you're going through the tunnel of that feeling. Like you can't, right? It's why some people who experience intense frustration for kind of the first time ever at age 22, they have a really hard time versus kids who were frustrated, their whole life. They never learned to read in an easy way. I had to work and work and work. And I'm just more prepared to have frustration than the person who everything came easily to. Right. So let's come back to then knowing that framework. What is a tantrum? To me, a tantrum is a sign that my kid's feelings overpowered their ability to manage those feelings in the moment, right? And that happens all the time in childhood because kids come into the world fully able to feel with zero coping mechanisms in their body really to deal with intense feelings. I always think it's just like a very inconvenient truth. It's like, oh, well, that's inconvenient, right? Because they have the intense feelings and they're just kind of raw. Right. So a tantrum in my mind is a kid's way of saying like the feelings inside my body felt so big, so unmanageable, or maybe I had a feeling that happened in the moment, but it kind of tipped over the bucket of all the feelings that had built up to that moment, right? Which is why when our kids, I don't know, when we cut their grilled cheese in half and they didn't want it, right? They're so disappointed. Well, all the disappointment of the last day or the last 3 days in my mind has built up. And then it overflows. It literally comes out of their body. It comes out of their extremities with screaming, with flailing, maybe with hitting, right? It actually comes out because they didn't have the skills to kind of manage it inside of them. It didn't have a home anymore. It was just too overpowering. That's what a tantrum is. The problem isn't the behavior, really. The problem isn't even the feelings. The problem is that they haven't yet learned the skills. And the best way kids learn skills to manage tantrums is through something called co-regulation, right? A kid is dysregulated, unable to regulate. How does a kid learn that feelings can be managed? Well, they actually don't learn that through a textbook or even right away through some strategy. The first proof they have is that my parent was able to stay calm when I couldn't. That really gives a child evidence, oh, this feeling feels super overwhelming to me, but obviously can get to the point where it is manageable because I'm watching my parent be able to stay calm in my presence. Kids don't learn that when they're sent away to their room. There, they actually learn the opposite. Wow, this feeling is so repulsive. Not only is it overwhelming to me that it comes out of my body in this kind of really violent way, but wow, this feeling also threatens my evolution, threatens my attachment because I was sent away. This feeling is so bad that nobody could even be with me. We think kids learn, no, I just don't like it when you hit me. That's not the lesson kids learn. Kids learn the feeling that led to the hit is unlovable, is unmanageable. And that actually just adds shame to the feeling, which makes the feeling harder to regulate. So forget not learning skills. We've actually kind of dug ourselves even deeper. So what does staying look like? So I'm not going to let my kid hit me. I'm not going to let them hit someone else. I'm not going to let them throw blocks. And I'm going to use that language. I won't let you hit. That's a kind of set of words I think that every parent has to just commit to their vocabulary. I won't let you. Not, we don't, and not, please stop. Because again, if they could have stopped, they would have stopped, right? I won't let you kind of establishes I'm that pilot on the flight, right? I am your sturdy leader. So my kid is so upset that I cut their grilled cheese, right? Or whatever it seems like in that moment they're upset about. Now they're trying to kick me. I would position their body in a different way. I'd move away or I'd catch their foot. Or if they're trying to hit me, I'd literally catch their wrist and say, I won't let you hit me. I know you're upset. I'm here to help you. Some version of that, right? So I stop the behavior and then I really establish that my kid is a good kid having a hard time, not a bad kid doing bad things through my ability to stay calm, which goes back to kind of our work on ourselves, which is the secret of parenting, that it's all about the work we do on ourselves, right? And my ability to see kind of under some quote bad behavior to a good kid who's struggling.
I am going to take, I won't let you with me because we don't, and please don't are just common words that I'm using as a parent. And I can see that immediately, but I won't let you feels, I mean, it's so much more control. You just went from being not only the pilot that's flying the plane, but you're ready to land it on the Hudson River because you're in so much control.
That is exactly right. That's exactly right. And I really mean this. It's kind of like a badass thing to say, like when you hear yourself say it, like, and if those aren't words you use, I would encourage anyone listening really to practice in front of the mirror. You're building that voice, right? But I won't let you. What it says to your kid actually is, I know you're doing the best you can. I know you're actually having a hard time and I'm not going to let the kind of not so great outcome happen over and over. It establishes that you're the person who's going to stop them. So we have to be the boundary for our kid that they actually can't be for themselves. And after we do that and do other things to build coping skills, our kids start to be able to be that boundary for themselves. But if we're not willing to be it first, well, we can't expect a 3-year-old or like a 6-year-old to suddenly have a skill that they're demonstrating they don't have.
I won't let you. I won't let you leave this conversation before we hear from Dr. Tina Bryson, a trained child and adolescent psychotherapist who, in episode 212, kept us on the emotional track with seeing, understanding, and reacting to the many ways our kids express themselves.
Ross Greene, many years ago, said, kids do well when they can. And I love that phrase so much because as a society, we're wrong about a lot of things when it comes to seeing and responding to children's behaviors. It's a lot of it based on really old research that was primarily done on animals. And now that we know more about the developing brain and the nervous system, we can really come to see that the experiences kids have, the repeated experiences they have, really do impact how their brains get developed. That doesn't mean all the pressure has to be on us as parents because they have a lot of experiences in the world as well. And one thing that I think is really liberating for us as parents is to know that even like if you think about something that you're worried about your child or a behavior that's driving you crazy or whatever's going on right now, that even if you don't do anything in terms of intervention or using a strategy, just your child's brain development unfolding will make them more resilient, will make them be better able to make decisions, all of those things, because we really can trust development. As the brain develops and unfolds, it gets better and better and better. For example, a lot of people don't know that around the age of 4 or 5, kids tend to have another big surge of separation anxiety. Parents are like, oh no, and they start to worry their child has something wrong with them. But what we can come to understand is that around age 4 or 5, they have this huge burst of cognitive development that allows them to imagine scarier things happening, right? So now they have this amazing imaginative brain that can imagine something scary happens if they go into the bathroom by themselves without you there with them, but they don't have the emotional regulation capacity to manage those new thoughts and those new abilities. So it's really healthy and normal for them to have it. It's a sign of good development unfolding. When we understand that their behaviors happen because of where they are in development, because of what state they're in that moment, in their little nervous systems, we can look at any kind of behavior, whether it's a tantrum falling apart kind of thing, might even come out as oppositional, yelling at you, I hate you, you're so stupid. It might be aggression toward a sibling. It might be whatever it is. In those moments, we can say, look, when my child is in a regulated state and their brain is in an integrated state, they do handle themselves well. And when they are at their worst, that is when they most need connection. If we want our children to become self-disciplined humans who are great in the world and handle themselves well, they have to have a lot of learning along the way in order to do that. So when we think about challenging behaviors like tantrums, disrespect, irresponsibility, etc., and I can give you lots of examples from my own family.
I can give you a couple too. Yeah.
When we see those moments, it's not like in the moment I'm like, oh, how great, my kid's throwing a fit about having to go to bed. I'm not in that moment thinking, what a wonderful opportunity to build his brain. I'm not. I'm going, are you effing kidding me? I'm so tired, go to bed, right?
Yeah.
But truly, if we have this perspective that each experience we're providing to kids, which don't have to be perfect, is part of, like when you think about lifting weights, you do reps, right? Every rep you do makes your muscles stronger. That's how it is with experiences with the brain. So each time I can give my kid a rep to practice a skill, to learn something new, to think about another solution or another approach to handling big anger instead of hitting his brother. Anytime I do those things, I'm building the brain. When we connect, when we are present in the moment, we help our child calm down, we bring empathy and connection to them. It actually settles their whole nervous system and moves their brain and nervous system into a receptive state in which they can learn. And that's when we can do skill building to help them get those reps to become the person they're meant to be.
I love that analogy because I love a goal and I love looking at things in a different way, like finding the silver lining and saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do to feel like what you said, like a productive mom, you don't want to feel like you're constantly saying no. You don't want to feel like you're constantly shutting things down and creating a dysregulated state in your child. So
here's the thing we need to know. The brain is an association machine. And our nervous system is programmed to go toward what feels good and pleasant and to push away from or turn away from what doesn't feel good or pleasant. Mm-hmm. When my child, so I have this time I had told my kid I was going to take him to the movies and he asked if he could get movie popcorn. And I said, no, we're not getting movie popcorn. I'll bring you a snack and we'll eat it on the way, healthy snack on the way to the movie theater. And he started to pout. So I'm immediately pissed. I'm like, I'm taking you to the movies. Do you know how many kids never get to go to the movies? You're so spoiled and entitled. And then my brain jumps to, he's a spoiled, entitled kid and he'll always be terrible. So my immediate response is to want to say, I can't believe you're fussing about that when I'm doing something nice for you. Or why are you making such a big deal about not getting movie popcorn? So if I say things like that, his experience is, wow, I just shared how I felt with my mom. And kids don't share by saying, hey, I'm noticing I'm feeling disappointed because like that's not how they share. They share with pouting. Mm-hmm. Or by slamming something down or saying something. That's how he's sharing his emotion with me because he has an undeveloped brain. Mm-hmm. And I have to know he's not going to stay that way. So in that moment, he shared with me how he felt. And I responded in a way that felt bad. Mm-hmm. So then he's like, maybe I'm not going to share how I feel with her. So instead of criticizing and minimizing, what I want to do is empathize. And so instead of criticize, I'm going to empathize. And I'm going to say with curiosity, like, I just said movies and you got excited. And then I said no popcorn. And it looks like you're sad or disappointed. Do I have that right? And he's like, yeah. And then he tells me last time we got popcorn and I love movie popcorn. We don't get it very often. And I can say, yeah, when we want something or hope for something and it doesn't happen, we can feel disappointed. That's what happens sometimes. And we're not going to get the popcorn, but I'm still happy to take you to the movies. And so in that moment, I'm validating his experience in a way that feels good to him. Yeah, sometimes we feel that way when we don't get what we want. And it's okay. You can feel two things at once. You can feel grateful that we're getting to go to the movies and excited, and you can feel disappointed that you're not getting popcorn. And that's okay to feel any of those things. And I can handle your big feelings, and I know you can handle your big feelings. So I think that's really important to keep in mind, is that the way we respond does give them a rep about how safe they feel really sharing themselves with us.
So let's jump right into episode 199 with Jen Curtis, an educational consultant and best-selling author, where she outlines some key teachings from her book, The Parent Compass.
So there actually is a whole section in the Parent Compass where we do give questions for parents to ask their tweens, teens, and frankly, younger kids as well. It was intended kind of to replace that, like, so how was your day? Because that doesn't ever go anywhere. And we know that, but it comes out naturally. I mean, I still do it all the time. Okay, everyone, how was your day? And I met with silence. Fine. It was fine. And so the questions are in there to elicit conversation, to elicit dialogue, which then again is going to help our kids feel understood and help them feel like we're really present with them in the moment. I love this anecdote that we give. So Izzy Rabi, who's a Nobel laureate, he comes out and he talks about how when he would get home from school every day, while all the other moms were asking their kids, like, how did your test go? Or how was your day? His mom would ask, did you ask a good question today? And he very much credits that to all that he has accomplished. So I would urge parents to check out the list of questions that we have in the Parent Compass, even just for the younger kids, like, who did you sit next to at lunch today? Or who told the funniest joke today? Or what did you fail at today? Or what do you think you did well today? I think those are great ones. So then the second part of this is kind of how do we have that language behind growth mindset versus fixed mindset? How do we instill grit and resilience in our teens and tweens and even younger kids? There's a whole chapter in the book called Praise the Journey, Not the Destination. And the point was to really focus on the effort over the outcome. This all does come from Carol Dweck's research on the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. So as parents, when we're reinforcing a growth mindset, we're really normalizing mistakes. We're teaching that they're a really potent way to learn. It's a way to really instill critical self-advocacy skills, their ability to speak up for themselves, ask for help when they need it, and even seek hard to hear constructive criticism. We recognize and praise them for what they did to master a task rather than focusing really narrowly on the achievement. So we might focus on the time that it took for them to seek extra help from a teacher or from the hours of preparation they put into a project or bettering their time in some sort of an athletic feat, basically their diligence, instead of maybe a certain grade. And so they learn that if they work on their intelligence, that they can be growing in it. And then when they make a mistake, they can welcome and they can embrace that mistake, and they can then look at it as an opportunity to analyze it and look at what they can do better next time. But what I love the most about what Carol Dweck says is that she really urges parents and teens and tweens and kids to embrace the word yet, meaning I can't do that yet. And I think as parents, we can make that a part of our kids' vocabularies, is that they can be working on whatever it is they're working on, and maybe they can't do it, but it's just that they can't do it yet. A fixed mindset, on the other hand, is a lot more rigid. So we're focusing more on awards and recognition. And so when we are focusing on the growth mindset, we're really teaching kids to approach challenges with intrigue and curiosity. And again, to see failure not as an endpoint, but really as a stepping stone, and to love learning for the sake of simply gathering knowledge.
Oh, I love that. Simple as 3 letters, yet.
Even if you do have a failure, even in your work life, like sometimes I do try to point that out to particularly my older daughter, who can understand it a little bit better. And I talk about like, gosh, I could have done this better. And we do talk about what that felt like for me, how I can change it, because I want her to understand that she can think through those things too.
Oh, it's That's really beautiful. And good to just be reminded of that, because I think our kids probably look at us and they're like, they already know how to ride a bike and swim. Like they're perfect. I remember thinking my parents were impermeable and just godly, you're like, whoa, they're so cool and amazing. But just to remind them that we're still growing and learning too.
Yeah.
What are some like other daily things that we can do to bring our family together?
Okay, a few things. So actually the first thing that came to mind when you started to ask that question, a couple more tips that I like to give just for teaching kind of the confidence and the self-reliance for younger kids. Something that I really like to do is really giving them power over their room. I know it sounds silly, but for one of my daughter's birthdays, we just redid her room for her as like a gift. It was great. And then she brought out all of her trinkets. And her trinkets are just like everywhere. It's just like clutter mess. And I'm just standing there watching like, oh my gosh, but it's her space and she loves it. She thinks it's fantastic. And so I just have to close the door and zip my lips and let that be her space. Or another thing is letting them dress themselves. Sometimes it is cringeworthy what my kids put themselves in, but they think that they are rocking it and they should. So I think that's another easy one. And then one of my favorite ones is actually letting them pack for themselves. So if we go away for just a weekend or on a vacation, I do have my kids pack for themselves. And they've done it enough now that even my 6-year-old can fully pack for a week-long vacation for herself. It wasn't always that way. I had to obviously guide her or sometimes like sneak in a few extra bathing suits or whatever. But I think what it does is it gives them control over the vacation itself, honestly, because sometimes that can even bring up anxiety in kids, but also just it can get them excited about where they're going and give them the confidence that like they can prepare themselves. They see us packing and they can do it. But then I think the biggest thing, getting back to your question, is family dinner. I think that's a whole part that we have in the Parent Compass. And there is research related to the fact that frequent family dinners are correlated with less engagement in risk behaviors. It is a difficult task, particularly as your kids get older with sports and all the different activities. But what we like families to know that it doesn't have to be dinner. Maybe it's breakfast or another time where the whole family can gather during a day. The other thing is if parents are having a difficult time, sometimes I'll hear that parents say like, we'll do the family dinner, but then we get there and nobody knows what to talk about. We love table topics. Our kids really thrive when we can go around and ask questions. Another thing that the research also shows is, and this is something pertinent in my home where my husband is a first responder. And so he's not home a lot. And so we don't get to do family dinners, all 4 of us. And the research actually shows that if another parent is there, if it is a 2-parent home, if another parent is there, or even if a trusted, maybe grandma is there, then a lot of those risk-taking behaviors can also be mitigated. So family dinners, really important. I think that those can really help to connect and bring families together and also avoid other behaviors that maybe we don't want to see in the future.
Yeah, all great tips.
Taking us to the finish line of this wide-ranging conversation on keeping kids healthy and happy is Dr. Marian Van Horn. From way back in episode number 74, she reaffirms the importance of taking care of yourself and of authentic communication in the family, no matter the circumstance.
It's, I think, important for our children to see the authentic us. And they're going to, yeah. So I wanted to tell you that the other day, one thing that's important for me is that I see I have some really close girlfriends and they've moved, they're about 2 hours away, but I still make an effort to see them. And it's been really hard recently, but one of them was having a birthday. So I decided I was going to drive and meet them for a walk in the woods and have a picnic outside. And so just as I was leaving, my daughter came up to me and she said, how can you leave us like this? And we've just spent like 6 months together all day, every day. They just started going back to school. So she's like, when we go to school, you stay home. And then when we come home, you leave us. And I'm like, wow, where's this is coming from? Like, yeah. And I realized, so I had to take a moment because, like, wow, that's a lot. I
don't want to feel guilty. I really need a day to go and visit and chat with my other friends. And so I took a moment and then I realized that it is a lot for her. I hadn't told her. I'd spoken to my husband. He knew I was going. I may have mentioned it. So it was a big moment for her. She's like, where is she leaving? Why is she leaving us? And then in the end, she wasn't happy, but I left and I was okay. I was like, I'll be back. And then when I came back, I told her about my trip and I told her how important it is for me to be seeing my friends and that I have a life outside my family. I go to work. And all these things are really important for her to see that this is real life. And when I came back, she was obviously extremely happy and she had a great day and everything was fine. So these moments where we think, there could be different reactions when that happens, that you have to kind of remember that they're young and they just need us to support and not react to them.
Definitely. And I think also communication and coming back and explaining the importance, you're validating like that her feelings are real, but that you also have feelings and that when she feels, I'm sure when you're teaching her, when she becomes a mom, and if she becomes a mom and then has a job and then has her friends, that life is a juggle and it is about like that you are the most important thing to me because you're my family, but I haven't seen these people in months. And like, this is also important. That's right. It's full circle and full communication, I think is just such a great example that you're setting for your kids.
Yeah. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned is your family is really important, but you're important and your outside life is important and they need to see everything. And we shouldn't be trying to make it look like we have any kind of anything figured out, that it's always evolving. We're all learning. My kids teach me things all the time. And I think that's great. So, that's kind of how I want to have our family, is that we're all interacting with each other and communicating and growing together.
I love it. Being present for our kids, getting them outside, making sure they're sleeping, looking at their micronutrients, trying to elevate the choline in their diet, and getting them involved so that they're willing to eat these beautiful, real foods, I think is so, so important. Thanks for joining us this week for another special Roundtable episode. You can go to bewellbykelly.com and search the term kids to find all sorts of resources. From my Fab 4 Under 4 course, additional podcast episodes, blog posts with recipes, recommended medicine, and additional items to have on hand, and a whole lot more. There's so much to know about kids, and I'm so glad you're using us as a resource to find your experts. Here are their formal intros. Today's guest is Dr. Nicole Birkins. She has a 22-plus year career in providing parents with simple, effective, and research-based strategies to get to the root of their children's anxiety, attention, mood, and behavioral challenges. She is one of the world's leading holistic child psychologists, and her down-to-earth approach inspires thousands of parents to trust their instincts, focus on one step at a time, and never give up hope. She built and runs a multidisciplinary evaluation and treatment clinic. She's a best-selling author, published researcher, award-winning therapist, and a mom of 4. I'm so excited about today's guest. Marianne Van Horn is a neuroscientist studying developmental neuroplasticity. She obtained her PhD in neurophysiology from McGill University and is currently a postdoc researcher at the Montreal Neurological Institute, where she studies molecular and cellular mechanisms underlying developmental neuroplasticity. Whew! Mouthful. She studies how external factors can influence how neurons explore and is trying to better understand the nitty-gritty signaling pathways underlying how neurons make strong synaptic connections with other neurons to make functional neural circuits. Marianne is also a mom of 3 and is fascinated about how early life experiences can influence the development of her kids. Marianne leans on the research that tells us that early life experiences are important for shaping the brain and uses this as an excuse to slow down and appreciate the time she has with her children. While parenting is not easy, she reminds us that the books we read, our children, the conversations we have, the banana bread we make, the camping trips we go on are all experiences that will help build a better brain in the long run. Marianne lives in Montreal, Canada, and she and her husband share candid everyday moments on their YouTube channel, Viva Family, and on Instagram at Marianne_Van Horn. Dr. Becky is a clinical psychologist and a mom of 3. She specializes in helping people cope with anxiety and stress, improve relationship satisfaction and communication, and manage work-life pressures. Dr. Becky has an expertise in parenting and child development. She equips parents with tools to strengthen parent-child relationships, decrease problem behaviors, and build more peaceful homes. Becky received a BA in Psychology and Human Development, summa cum laude from Duke University, and a PhD in Clinical Psychology from Columbia University. Dr. Becky maintains a private practice, runs parenting groups and workshops, lectures on various mental health issues, and consults for organizations. Jennifer Anderson is a registered dietitian and has a Master's of Science in Public Health from Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. In 2017, she founded Kids Eat in Color, a resource that helps children and families have better nutrition and mental health. Prior to starting Kids Eat in Color, she coordinated youth nutrition programs at a food bank, performed research in inner-city food deserts, and consulted for the USDA. Her academic background is in public health, nutrition, cultural anthropology, and economics. Dr. Eliza Song is an integrative pediatrician, pediatric functional medicine expert, and a mama. In her integrative pediatric practice, Whole Family Wellness, she's helped thousands of kids get to the root cause of their health concerns, and she's helped their parents understand how to help their children thrive, mind, body, and spirit, by integrating conventional pediatrics with functional medicine, homeopathy, acupuncture, herbal medicine, and essential oils. Dr. Song created Healthy Kids, Happy Kids as an online, holistic pediatric resource to help practitioners and parents bridge the gap between conventional and integrative pediatrics with an evidence-based, pediatrician-backed approach. Tina Payne Bryson is the author of The Bottom Line for Baby and the co-author with Dan Siegel of The Yes Brain, The Power of Showing Up, as well as 2 New York Times bestsellers, The Whole Brain Child and No Drama Discipline, each of which has been translated into over 50 languages. She is the founder and executive director of the Center for Connection, a multidisciplinary clinical practice in Southern California. Dr. Bryson keynotes conferences and conducts workshops for parents, educators, and clinicians all over the world, and she frequently consults with schools, businesses, and other organizations. And LCSW, Tina is a graduate of Baylor University with a PhD from USC. And if you don't know Dr. Tina Bryson's work, please look up her books. She has informed so much of my parenting, and I just can't thank her enough for all of the hours and time it has taken to put out these amazing books, and I just can't recommend her enough. Jen Curtis is an educational consultant, a best-selling author, and a professional speaker. As the owner of FutureWise Consulting, she has worked with hundreds of students throughout the United States on every aspect of the college admission process. She's particularly passionate about empowering teens to approach life with intention and educating parents about using the parent compass. She's also the founder of FutureWise Collective, a digital college counseling program aimed at helping seniors navigate the college application process with confidence. Jen's book, The Parent Compass, Navigating Your Teen's Wellness and Academic Journey in Today's Competitive World, offers parents advice on fostering grit and resilience to help kids and teens approach their life with purpose. Thank you for listening to Be Well by Kelly. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Learn more at BeWellByKelly.com and follow me on Instagram at BeWellByKelly. I would love if you picked up my books, Body Love and Body Love Every Day. They're sold on Amazon and at all major booksellers.